computer. All right. Perfect. So hi, everybody. I'm Justine. I think most of you probably know me at this point, but I'm the Grand Vice President for Collegiates. And just in case we have some new people on here, I want to make sure you're aware. I think there's some new names, which is wonderful. So welcome to the March already pep talks. I could not believe how quickly this came up. I think it's just because February is so short. But happy to have everybody here. We're going to talk a little bit about officer transitions as well as elections today. And I go off on a couple tangents, but there'll be a couple questions I need answers from today. So hopefully we get a little bit of participation, nothing too crazy, but just want to make sure that you guys are alive on the other side sometimes. All right. So throughout the presentation today, we're going to review again how to hold your elections, how to empower your younger members to maybe take some officer positions, why your transitions are needed, as well as how to transition out of your officer positions and transition in new officers. And so I know some people that are attending may be outgoing officers, and some people may be interested in taking on some of these new officer positions and are interested in what some of those transitions entail. Also, we'll talk about some end of the year requirements. I know it's the beginning of March, but then it becomes the beginning of April and then the beginning of May, and the finals wrap up so quickly. It's going to be a blur and it'll go quickly. So I just want to touch on a couple of end of the year requirements within this presentation as well. All right, so we're going to first focus on the actual elections themselves and how to do them. It actually is really based on your bylaws. Specifically, the national chapter bylaws are going to be where you really identify our minimum. So at minimum, you need your president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer to be elected. But you need to check in on your bylaws for your own chapter to see what additional officer positions you may need as well. So there could be additional positions, historian, chaplain, maybe you have a president-elect, or maybe you have other positions that you also need to do. So check in on your bylaws, and this is a good time to, one, confirm, do you know where your bylaws are? Have you reviewed your bylaws lately? And making sure that by reviewing your bylaws, you make sure that they're up to date. And there should be a section of your bylaws as well that tells you how frequently to review your bylaws and how to bring up any changes that you want to make in your bylaws. There could be sections that are completely out of date by this time. And so maybe you need to update something to be a little bit more in the moment and more to the 21st century. So another thing, only sisters in good standing can vote. And that should also probably be something that's written into your bylaws. And this means that even if they're not present, so maybe you have sisters that are off on their appies, but they are in good standing, should still have the ability to vote. So you can do this in a number of different ways, whether that's sending out the speeches written out, or in the Zoom world that we're all in, maybe they can join via Zoom, or you can record the Zoom and send it to them and they can review it and then cast their vote that way. Just something to kind of think about. The other thing is, do you know what sisters in good standing means for your chapter? Does anybody know what it means to be in good standing as a member?
I think for us, we kind of go based off as long as you're attending all the mandatory events.
Okay.
We have like our 4 pillars they have to attend each semester, and that dues are paid.
Perfect. Dues are paid is the number one.
Okay.
Okay, so that's great. I was like waiting to hear that. So you're right. Every chapter is going to be different. So your chapter sounds like they have to hit a certain amount of events, pillars, etc. Some people could have a point system. I don't know if there are repercussions to not meeting those requirements that would allow you to not vote versus maybe, I think I've heard of some chapters saying, if you can't meet all these, you don't go to your professional events, you don't go to community service, but you only go to the fun sisterhood events, then like that doesn't really jive with us. You need to be kind of a well-rounded sister. But does that mean that they can't vote? It should be probably written out somewhere what that means if you don't meet all those requirements. But in my opinion, I would assume that any member that is a paid member, so they're paying their dues, means that they should be able to vote, but each chapter is different. So I just want to make sure that you're reviewing that in your bylaws. Once you have elected your new officers, you also need to make sure to update headquarters with the results. And those officer rosters are due the end of April and then also middle of September, just in case there's any changes. That also updates us with the names and your advisors and the mailing address for anything. And we know sometimes you might move different dorm rooms or apartments on campus or off campus. So again, checking your chapter bylaws for how your elections are actually supposed to be held. Are there speeches involved? Are there not? How do those not present cast ballots? Are you doing electronically? Pieces of paper? Can anybody be nominated? Can you self-nominate? Do you have to be nominated by somebody else? Do you have to accept or therefore also reject the nomination if you're not interested? Do you have a limitation to how many positions somebody can run for? What happens if you get elected to multiple positions? And also be sure there's no additional school requirements that put any limitations on officers if there's any GPA cutoffs or anything like that, years of being in pharmacy school. So when to actually have your elections, I think a lot of us assume we should wait until the very, very, very end of the semester. I'm more of a proponent of holding your elections a little bit earlier in the second semester. So in the spring semester, holding it earlier, so around like now to April. What this does is it allows for appropriate time for officer transitions while your current officers or the immediate past officers are still present on campus for questions and to help with guiding the new officers. Also, you may be doing spring initiation or you've got your fall initiates, and those that were just initiated can also step in and take on maybe smaller leadership roles and get their kind of foot in the door in the leadership realm. I put in the bottom right corner, big L, little L. Has anybody heard of what that is? Or does anyone want to, can anyone mention like what big L and little L means? Okay, that's okay. So big L and little L is talking about leadership. So you can be a big L leader, which is those that have a significant formal leadership position, like a director, associate director, president, anything like that. But every pharmacist, and I'm going to continue that to pharmacy student too, or an intern, can also be a little L. And you can be a little L in so many different other capacities or jobs that you have on campus, off campus, in your community, in your church, or religious organization. And so sometimes people have these roles without actually being formally recognized. And a lot of times we don't even realize that we're doing these kinds of little L leadership type of moments. But this is specifically coming from a Harvey Whitney lecture from Sarah White from 2006. I put the citation in the bottom right corner. It's a really great article. And she actually, I think there should be a recording of it, but then it's all typed out as a written lecture as well. But it talks about how we actually have to move into the future and how do we cultivate these pharmacy leaders in general. And not everybody can be a big L, but everybody does have a lot of these little L moments. And so, just because you maybe aren't going to be president or vice president, it's still really important to have a lot of these little L people and maybe committee chairs, or even people that are just going to be taking on smaller roles as just leading an actual event. That's going to be a little L role. Okay. So I always like to talk about big L and little L when it comes to that. And it's often talked about in pharmacy. Another thing that you might not know is that there's actually a ritual for new officers for a transition. So there's an installation of chapter officers. It's about 2.5 pages. It's in the ritual book. So I just put kind of a copy here just for a visual, but take a look at it. It's not a secret ceremony. But it is just a way to kind of do a formal transition from one group of officers to the next. I think it's maybe nice if your chapter doesn't currently do this to just have it as a part of that transition meeting that you have to kind of introduce your new officers, kind of physically pass a gavel or any kind of physical property that you need to pass on, rather than just having it, outside of school or class and just kind of like, here you go. So having it a little bit more special, I think is really nice as well. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome. Here's one of my many tangents in this. Does anyone know about what imposter syndrome is?
I mean, in my experience, it's feeling that the position that you've gotten isn't earned and that you don't really deserve it. And then you just kind of feel like an imposter.
Exactly. Yeah, very good. So I'm glad that at least somebody knows about it, and maybe other people have heard about this as well. I talk about this a lot because I identified this a long time ago in myself. And one of the ways they talk about moving through imposter syndrome, or just kind of getting better with it, there's no cure. I don't know how to talk about it, but it's identifying it and talking about and being vulnerable about how you feel. And so kind of give the full definition. I'll actually found this within Canva, but so it's a psychological condition characterized by unfounded feelings of inadequacy concerning abilities, skill, talents, etc., and the fear of being revealed as a fraud. And a discounting of personal success, often experienced by high-achieving individuals, attributing accomplishments to luck rather than skill, considered a phenomenon, not a mental illness. Okay, so experienced by high-achieving individuals, all of you are. I'm hoping that some of this resonates with many of you, and I think the more often that we realize that this may be why you have feelings that you do, makes things make more sense, I will say. So maybe you resonate with this as well. So there's a couple different types of imposter syndrome. One is a superhero type. So somebody that overworks themselves to make up for how inadequate they feel. Okay. A natural genius type. So you're setting exceedingly high goals and then you feel crushed when you can't meet them. Or maybe you're an expert type and you never feel satisfied with your level of understanding. So you're always continuously learning more. Or you're a perfectionist type, never completely feeling happy with your work and you're always fixated on the flaws. And so this I'm noticing it says instead of your strengths. I notice this oftentimes when giving feedback to residents that I have on rotation. They stop listening when I tell them about the positives because they're only focused on even a small critique that I've made or constructive criticism. Or a soloist. This I think is really concerning when it comes to a leader, but somebody that prefers to work alone and doesn't ask for help for fear of appearing weak or incompetent. You can't do everything alone. If you're a current chapter leader, I know how much work there is for you to do, and it is impossible to complete it all alone, okay? So the earlier you can identify that you experience imposter syndrome, I feel the better. And the more you can talk about it and this resonates with you, I think the easier it is to kind of start moving forward from it. This will all make sense when I'm talking about it soon. So data shows that women specifically express their ideas as questions to avoid being perceived as abrasive and are penalized for exerting power in meetings and minimizing their salary expectations and ambitions compared to men. Also, underrepresented minorities are also prone to imposter syndrome because maybe they have a smaller proportion of similar role models. And then more specifically in pharmacy residents, there was a survey that they identified PGY1 and 2 pharmacy residents to have that they self-identified themselves about 57.5% of them as imposters. And I actually feel like that's a low ball. So how to fix imposter syndrome is really to talk about it and work through it. the reason why I'm bringing this up is because imposter syndrome is important to consider when it comes to leadership opportunities. I personally never self-identified myself as somebody that wanted or thought I could be a region supervisor myself or sit on Grand Council. So the reason why I'm here is because other people suggested it to me. Other people said, we see this in you and we think that you would do a really great job. I never identified that in myself because I felt like I would have probably failed. So a lot of that comes in the need for identifying others and seeing the what others can do that they don't feel like they can do themselves. So you may need to do some encouraging, and I highly suggest not waiting and not doing encouraging. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but don't wait for people to self-identify themselves for future chapter leaders. If you see any instance of somebody that's experiencing or demonstrating really great leadership skills, even on a small level, so maybe they led a fundraiser, maybe they led a Hope Walks event, even if they're not the committee chair, tell them that they did a really great job and suggest that maybe they take this new leadership role in the future, and remind them of that again, maybe when it comes to election time, because sometimes it takes somebody else to see what they can do for them to realize that they can maybe take a step up, and talk about the support that you can give them as well. So delegating throughout the year as well to your chapter members, trying not to be that soloist imposter syndrome person, and trying to delegate throughout the year can also give people the experience that they need to succeed in small ways throughout the year that gives them that encouragement. Okay. And encouraging, like I said, smaller leadership roles through maybe committee chairs or just doing smaller events and things like that as well. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Tangent ended for the moment. I'll pause there for a moment. What questions do you have so far? Questions on imposter syndrome? Questions on elections? I will say it's completely appropriate for people to self-identify themselves as wanting to step up and take a leadership position. I don't want to negate that, but also want to say that if you're finding that nobody's interested, it may be that they feel like they can't.
I have kind of a question. So I had a meeting with our dean a few weeks ago, and we just talked about like students becoming almost too involved in organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't have like a GPA requirement or anything like that for somebody to not be able to run for a position. But she just said, like, consider a student's academic standing first. But how do you recommend like going about that and having that conversation if I know somebody's struggling? I don't want to like, drift them away from running for a position, but I want to be realistic about, the requirements.
Yeah. I think, one thing to consider maybe is their ability to take on multiple roles. So, if there's somebody that's already super involved in like ASHP and SNAFA and all these other things, like maybe they don't take on the large roles in LKS, but maybe they take on a smaller role. I think when it comes to specifically their academics, of course, scholarship is one of our core values for LKS. So you want to make sure to highlight that. And, I think it's something you have to maybe discuss. Maybe there's a list that you make for who is a good, chapter leader, or who's going to be great in leadership. And I think it's just a conversation that you want to have. I don't think you can be, I would say, challenged you're not going to be able to put your best foot forward if you're being challenged in other areas. I don't really know the right answer, Jewel.
That's okay. I know we talked about that with the dean.
Yeah.
Like, there's no right answer, but I guess just
Yeah.
kind of getting another perspective of like how you would go about it. But yeah, that's perfect. Definitely something to think
I
of.
know that there have been some chapters that have had that have to submit their list of people that want to run to the dean's office, and then they kind of get it back like who's eligible based on GPA, but that becomes like a issue with FERPA and an issue, just it gets a little dicey because you know who you submitted and you know who you got back, and therefore you know who who is having some academic difficulties. So maybe just kind of putting that up front, like we want everybody to be successful academically. And maybe if you are having some issues with academics, maybe taking one of the smaller roles like a committee chair is going to be the best thing for both you and the chapter. So not maybe suggesting that they don't take a position totally, but something smaller that they can handle as long as they've been able to manage that in the past.
Gotcha. Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
But if that's been causing them to have the academic difficulties, then,
Yeah,
you know,
gotcha. All right. Thank you.
yeah, not the best answer. I don't really know the right answer, like you said. But, all right. Any other questions so far? Okay. All right, I'll move on. I could do a whole talk on imposter syndrome. So hopefully that resonated with people. If you've never heard about it before, I think it was a little bit of a mind-blowing moment when I heard about it, and I still, you know, deal with it on a daily basis, unfortunately. So it doesn't really go away. All right, so officer transitions specifically, this is really what is going to drive the success of your chapter. If this is done poorly, can be where your chapter really starts to be challenged and can lead to chapter failure. So preparation for this drives the success of the program to transition your officers. You have to have good organization and reflection skills for both your outgoing as well as your incoming officers. And this provides a strong foundation for their successors. The goal, though, is to minimize the impact and effectiveness of the transition process. So you want to do, you know, not too much work, but it's really going to be a lot of brain dumping. So it's significant transfer of knowledge is really what it is. So like I said, brain dumping all that you've learned. And I know that you all have learned a lot, where to look on the website for this, who to contact for this information, all of that information brain dumped for the next person. Because the last thing you want to do is have the next person have to go through the same process of all those things that you struggled with. Especially if you didn't have a great officer transition. And I'm well aware that a lot of the officer transitions during COVID in the last 2 years have been really challenging. So a great officer transition also helps to minimize confusion and minimizes the loss of momentum. Maybe things are going really, really well for your chapter. And if that momentum continues, then things will continue to go really well. But if you don't transition well, then that momentum can be lost because the next group is just struggling to figure out what is the next step, rather than knowing what the next step is and continuing on with those goals. So reflecting on maybe your SMART goals and your standard operating procedure. Those SMART goals are meant to be kind of for 3 years. So not meant to be something that you're changing every year. So you should have those same kind of more long-term goals. Maybe it's increasing membership or something along those lines. It also gives outgoing officers a sense of closure. You're passing things off, maybe physically or electronically, so that they know where all the loose ends are and that those are tied to the next person. Also sets up incoming officers for success and allows for time for reflection and goal setting. So there's a couple different ways to transition. There's independent study, where you're just kind of learning on your own. You can develop learning contracts, shadowing and mentoring, and there's also retreats and workshops. So specifically for independent study, this is where you're reviewing the expectations. Maybe you have it written out what each officer position, what the role is and what the expectations are. They're reviewed and then reviewed with the outgoing officers as well. Shadowing and mentoring. So the incoming officers are paired with the outgoing officers for a specific time. And that could be like an elect term. So maybe that's over an entire semester. Some chapters maybe have this for an entire year, and that helps with the transition. You also have learning contracts. So it's a list of skills and tasks that have been developed and you have to satisfy in order to be eligible. Maybe you're checked off in order to make sure that you understand what each task is. You also have retreats and workshops as an opportunity for in and outgoing officers to physically transition materials and discuss, and also allows for group planning and goal setting with the historical knowledge that's coming from the outgoing officers as well. And there's also 3 different types of meetings that you can hold kind of moving forward as well. So group information sharing, one-on-one, and then co-run meetings with both the in and outgoing officers. So that group information sharing is where you can overview all the goals for your chapter, again, reviewing your SMART goals, your standard operating procedure, talking about membership, budget, and like I said, great time to review that SWOT analysis. So your any kinds of threats to your chapter and its movement forward, as well as your SMART goal planning, or revisiting what your SMART goals are maybe. Also one-on-ones, so reviewing the responsibilities. Were personal goals met? What were their major challenges? What projects do they have currently in the works? And what were maybe some of their future ideas that they didn't get to, or what didn't work out and what caused them to not be able to get to some of those future ideas. Also, co-running the meeting with the incoming and outgoing officers. So as an opportunity for the new officers to run a meeting with the outgoing officers still present to be able to respond to questions and provide feedback. It's really hard at the end of the semester because there's not much going on with the meetings. And so this is another reason why I feel like having it a little bit earlier in the semester will allow for some experience physically for the new incoming officers to be able to co-run these meetings with actual substance in them with the outgoing officers still present. So for outgoing officers, you want to reflect on a lot of things. But one, making sure that you review the position requirements and make sure that there isn't anything that should be added for your standard position requirements or removed. Make sure to all written and electronic handoff is organized, remove emails or forward emails, make sure all your bills are paid if you're a treasurer, budget's all aligned, all correspondence, send final emails, thank you notes, review each event and process with a critical eye so that is this something we want to continue in the future? Was this worth all of the work that we put into it, or did nobody show up? And is this something we want to do again? Was there something that we didn't do that would have improved the amount of people in the future? Maybe it made it a more successful event. What are your current goals and future goals for the chapter, and how did you work to reach those goals? And then schedule some sort of meeting with your incoming officer. If you're an incoming officer, though, there's work for you to do and questions for you to ask as well. What do you wish you had done but didn't? What did you try but that didn't work out? What problems or areas will require attention in the next year? Who is the best person to go to for this, that, and the other thing? What are your current goals for the chapter? What needs to be done right now? And who are my go-to people to help when I'm not sure what to do? Okay. So we have created some resources. So I'll give always special thanks to our 2021 Collegiate Committee. We haven't used them yet this year, but last year we had I think 11 or 13 collegiate members helping us on a collegiate committee, and they came up with some really great officer transition guides and forms. And this is going to be part of the resource portal that we're working on creating. So we've got these guides and forms, and I'm going to send these out to you when I send the recording and the slides out to you along with the quiz tomorrow. So these are by all means not required for you to fill out, but hopefully you'll find that they're helpful and maybe help with some officer transition. They review the importance of the transition and talk about some suggestions on how you can transition. There's an outgoing officer transition form to allow for some of that reflection and reviewing of your responsibilities. You should fill that out before. And then an incoming officer transition form that allows you to start planning. And also you should fill that out after you have your meeting with your outgoing officer. So I have kind of some example of that guide that talks about essentially what you're doing as your officer as the transition process is happening and the importance of it. And then we've got the outgoing officer transition here. It's like 3 pages long, monthly tasks. So it lists, at each month, what are you doing? So some of this may be redundant because of the now chapter responsibilities document that we have, but maybe this is more reflective of the chapter specific things that you do. So maybe if you always do a gala in March, maybe you need to identify as your office position, you have to find a location for that gala in January, or maybe it needs to be in September. And it's really important for that officer to know when to start doing that work, because if they need to do it in September and they thought it was January, that's going to be a problem. They're not going to be able to find a place to host the gala. We also have the incoming officer transition. And like I said, a lot of information here, reflection, answers from the outgoing officer, and monthly tasks for them to start considering. Okay. So again, just touching, we've got this resource hub that we are working on developing some guides and documents and developing standard templates for PowerPoints and agendas and minutes, which will hopefully help you to provide some consistency and structure and consistency across different chapters as well. And hopefully make it a little bit easier to find things on the website. We know it's a little challenging sometimes. So I'll pause here for a moment, see if anybody has any questions on that section about officer transitions. If you're dying for a question, you can always throw it in the chat. All right. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about end of the year wrap up. So like I said in the beginning, end of the year comes faster than you guys are going to realize. So I just want to touch on a lot of things that are required for the end of the year. And these things should all be listed in the chapter responsibilities document if you're a current chapter officer. So you should have this all listed in there. But I'll just kind of give a little bit more detail to it. So you want to complete new graduate forms for any of your current APPE members. So people that are off on their APPEs, if they are a dues paid member, you need to fill out a graduate form, and then they get free dues for their first year of being an alumni member. You have to fill out the form. Officer roster is due once you can do it as soon as you elect your new set of officers. We also have the chapter member updates that are due on the 30th of April. And then Ruth Davies Flaherty, we know that from the last year that many chapters weren't submitting for those. It's just it's a Sister of the Year kind of award. So it's a really great, nice award to submit for one member of each chapter to receive. And so you want to make sure to do that if you want to receive your certificate. It takes about 2 to 4 weeks to arrive. So make sure you do that with enough time. If you have any kind of end of the year banquets or anything that you want to be able to present your certificate to your member, you want to make sure that you have enough time to do that. In a similar vein, also FLJ Heath keys, if you have any of your P4s or P6s, whatever your school calls them, anyone on their APPEs that's in the top 10% of their class, they're eligible for an FLJ Heath key, and that takes 4 to 6 weeks for delivery. And so you want to also make sure that you give yourself enough time to submit for those in order to get them for any kind of presentation that you might be having. Annual report is due on the 15th. We talked about that last Pep Talks a little bit. Only one submission per chapter, and all of this information from the annual report helps us to decide chapter, the level and year, like we talked about last month. And also similar to last month, we talked about chapter awards. There's 8 this year. So taking those into consideration and applying for those as well will be important. Nominating for alumni awards, that's due the 30th of April, and that includes Collegiate of the Year. So if you have a chapter member that you feel like is a good person to nominate for Collegiate of the Year, we suggest you do that, as well as if you want to recognize your advisor as Advisor of the Year, you want to do that as well by the 30th of April. And then convention. So really excited about convention this summer in person in Indianapolis in July. So you need to identify who will be your chapter delegate and alternate for convention, and you'll submit their credentials. We're encouraging attendance to come to the LKS Summer Convention this year as well. This is where the reason why I've remained an alumni and engaged alumni is because of my experiences through convention as well. So very exciting. I always suggest brand new officers to come, brand new members, but really anybody should be attending if they can, seeing if you can, get any school support or doing some fundraising this semester to help offset the cost would be great. And submitting items for the trust auction we'll talk about as well as delegates in a moment. But also adding the new president to the group me chat. If you're a current president, you want to thank your fraternity and faculty advisors, thank your region supervisor, and have your transition meeting. It's a lot. It's a lot to do at the end of the year. And you have to study for finals and be a high achiever. So I understand it's not easy being an officer. All right, so I want to talk about delegates to make sure you understand what a delegate is. So a delegate's going to be your voting member that represents your chapter during official business meetings at convention. They have to be returning to school in the fall. So if they're current APPE, they're going to be on APPEs during convention, that counts. But if they have just graduated, that doesn't count. So they're going to be an alumni member at that point. They can't be your delegate. They're going to be voting on bylaws changes to the national bylaws and other business items. And so you want to review the bylaws proposal, and also you can review the national bylaws yourselves and make any suggestions. I think there's a bylaws proposal suggestion that came out through email. So you want to study the proposal. I had a hard time clicking on it. I don't know if anybody else did. But there was one proposal this year. It was about removing wording on requiring letters of support for Grand Council candidates submitted by the nominating committee in the nominations and elections article. So that will be online, and you can review that, and you can decide as a chapter whether or not you support, or if you want to make changes to the proposed change bylaw, you can do that as well. So if you've ever been to ASHP national meeting, I don't know, they probably did them virtually. You probably got a good idea of how they go about doing all these changes and Robert's Rules of Orders. And so that's how we do that in the business sessions as well. So I mentioned earlier too about the trust auction. So I wanted to throw a couple slides in here about what the trust auction is, since I know it's been a couple years and some of you may have never been to an LKS convention. So what the trust auction is has been both a silent as well as partly live auction for items that are donated by both chapters as well as individual members, with 100% of the proceeds going to the LKS Educational Trust, which therefore goes to scholarships for collegiate members. So people have donated items like timeshares, t-shirt quilts, fraternity jewelry, memorabilia, crafts, things like that. And bids go crazy high with the alumni members. So therefore, we've also made an area of collegiate specific items because the alumni spend too much money. And so they'll probably outbid you on most of the things. So we made an area just for collegiates where the alumni can't try to pay a lot of money because the money is going towards a good cause. So what to donate? This is the time where it's really exciting to engage maybe some of your crafty chapter members if you want. Another option is to make a gift basket. I've had dreams in the past of really wanting every single chapter to donate a gift basket. I thought that would be a really great move, but now I'm just putting it here into the ether to see what you guys think. But if you have for instance, if you have 20 chapter members and everybody went out and purchased a $5 gift card, and you put that together into $25 gift cards as a gift card basket, that's $100 worth of gift cards. And then you donate that, that's therefore free for the educational trust, and people may get it for, I don't know, $50 or $75. It'll be less than what you guys spent, but each person only had to donate by $5 worth. Another suggestion I threw in here, I just made these up on the top of my head. A caffeine gift basket. Maybe you guys sold LKS mugs 4 years ago and you can't get rid of these mugs. So you put 2 mugs into a gift basket and you find a Starbucks gift card, some instant coffee, some tea, and espresso covered coffee beans from, or no, I'm sorry, I wrote that wrong. Chocolate covered espresso beans is what I meant to say, from Trader Joe's, because they're delicious. And there's your caffeine basket, or maybe a de-stress basket with face masks, nail polish, aromatherapy, bath bombs. I think collegiate members would like all of those things. Or you can also donate some of your old merch, some unused old t-shirts that you guys have in your closet hanging around that is from 5 years ago even. Other chapters want that stuff, I guarantee you. So donating it to try to move it out of your closet and your storage, bring it there. You can also bring it to the You Can shop. That's more like probably current stuff. If you've got a lot of t-shirts or mugs or something that you want to sell from your chapter, that is part of the You Can shop, which is kind of like just a store. So a lot of different chapters will sell their mugs, their shirts, their whatnot, and everybody goes crazy because LKS merch is a hot commodity at convention. All right, so this is actually all the stuff that I've donated in the past couple of years. So I'm one of the t-shirt quilt makers in the past. This one in particular was the first t-shirt quilt I made, and it went for, I think it got like $1,200 for the trust. It was a lot of time, but that was me donating my time. And I actually ended up collecting these t-shirts from other chapters. So it was kind of a national chapter collection of t-shirts across. And then I did the second one as well, but I didn't have as much, but that got a lot of money as well. Last year I made this cross stitch, and I made some mosaic letters one year. And I also made this last year too. It was a sweatshirt with LKS embroidered letters on it. So I have a crafty side to me, and I know that some of your other collegiate members in your chapter probably do as well. Maybe they paint, maybe they do something. This is the time to engage them, and maybe the chapter can support them with buying supplies, but this is the time to really maybe utilize them. So outside of that, I just wanted to kind of start coming to a close with a couple quotes that I found from omegaphi.com, which has a lot of really good resources for chapter leaders. But if a sorority president succeeds, her chapter succeeds along with her. And a sorority president must inspire equal parts trust and initiative in her sisters, and she can do this only when she is leading by example. So I know we are a fraternity. This was a direct quote. But I just wanted to kind of put this on here. You need to trust, you need to delegate, and it's important to lead by example as well when you are a leader. All right. Last thing is, when it comes to our future leaders, we are instituting a leadership summit. I think you've probably all heard this multiple times now, but I'm just going to keep reiterating it. Saturday, August 6th, 12 to 6 Eastern time. All presidents, vice presidents, secretaries, and treasurers are required to attend. So as you are trying to identify your new officers, make sure that they're aware of that and the requirements to attend. And again, this is not a punishment or anything by that means, but it is more in order to give them all the support and the foundations that they need to be able to hit the ground running in the fall. And in summary, I again want to thank you again. If you're a current chapter officer, I know it's a thankless job sometimes, so I would just want to thank you. Thank you for also being very open-minded. I know we've made a lot of changes between last year and this year, but hopefully you understand it's also to make your collegiate experience better. But also we're always open to any suggestions. You can throw it in my email at any time. You can DM me on Instagram. Anyway, call me, beat me if you want to reach me. Which is probably an outdated reference at this point. Okay. Also reminding you to not forget, I'm going to be sending out a quiz about this Pep Talks tomorrow evening when I send out the slides and the resources from today. You're going to have 7 days to submit your answers, and the score goes towards your chapter of the year and level scoring. So don't forget to submit that. And again, I highly suggest that you do it as a group. Make sure that the information goes beyond just you if you're the only representative from your chapter here as well. Last thing I'll mention is next Pep Talks, April 2nd, is going to be all about convention. So it'll be really exciting. So send anybody that's interested in convention, who's never been to convention, who's maybe on the fence about convention, who's definitely going to convention, all the people. We're going to talk about what the plans are for convention and what to expect and get excited. Okay. So I'll leave it there. What questions do you have for me?
I just had a quick question about Grand Council elections. Like,
Sure.
I know an email was sent out a while back about it, but when is it due? Or are we voting at convention?
No, there is a vote. There should be, that's a great question. I'm not sure the answer to it. You vote as, let me see if I can find it.
Because I was looking through the emails, and in the emails, they have the announcement, and then they say that there'll be further information, and then it gives you like an option for alumni to renew their dues. But then I was wondering if there was a link to like actually voting for it, because I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss it.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that my understanding, I don't think I've seen the votes yet either. It's 1 vote per chapter. So I'm going to guess that there'll be more information coming, and I would suggest just to hold tight, but I will follow back up on that because I'm not sure how they're actually going to send out the voting for the chapters.
Okay, no problem. I mean, if anything, I was just thinking to get started on making sure like the chapter knew the candidates and stuff, but if there's more information about it, then that makes sense. I can just wait on that too.
No, I think you're doing the right thing. I say, review the candidates, see if you have any additional questions. And I just don't know. Deb, I saw you come off mute. Did you know something that I don't?
I feel like I voted.
You did vote?
Already.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go look in my non-region supervisor email because I know it got sent to that one instead and see, but I'm pretty sure I voted already.
Okay. There's got to be, I'm not sure how the chapters vote though. So we will get back to you on that, but it's a great question, Sarah. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, but it will be before convention because the new officers transition at convention, and I think are definitely announced prior to convention. I just don't remember how they vote as a chapter. I don't know if it's like the president gets an email, I'm not sure, but more information to come for sure.
Hi, Justine. I actually got my ballot. I was just looking for the email. I got it on Tuesday, February 1st. And it was sent from like the LKS email, but I think it was from like invitations@mail.electionbuddy.com. So like a third party. And then there was a direct link to vote for your specific chapter. Like it said, like, this is Pi chapter's ballot.
Okay. All right. So maybe that's So only, okay. And so it just said that it was Pi chapter.
And my alumni ballot said, like, this is your alumni ballot. And voting deadline ends at February 28th at 11:45 p.m. Pacific. So the deadline has passed, at least for alumni members. So I would assume that's the same for collegiate chapters as well. And it did come from like Election Buddy.
I see. I definitely didn't vote. So I see that. Okay, so maybe only it went to the presidents or something like that. So I would send Aaron an email, Sarah, if you just to question that. Do you know if you got that email?
Yeah, I can look at it right now because I wasn't sure if it was directly from HQ or a third party.
Yeah.
And I thought I saw an email a while back and I was like confused. So I was waiting on more information about it, but then I never got it. So I just kind of assumed it was coming later, but I can double check my email, see if I had gotten the third party email, and then I can just message Aaron about it and kind of go from there.
Got it. Yeah, I think that there was, if I remember correctly, I remember there being a email about announcing it, and then there's a separate email about the vote. It's,
Okay.
I guess, but don't worry, I also did not vote. So, oops. Sometimes we forget things.
And I'm like 97% sure they would have gone to the like chapter president emails only. So
Probably.
yeah, that'd be weird to look.
Yeah, it's from invitations at mail.electionbuddy.com. Sometimes those go to like spam or somewhere like that, but. All right. Anyone else have any other additional questions? Okay. Well, I appreciate you all being here. I know that was a lot of information. Hopefully it was helpful to help your transitions. If you think of anything, additional questions, please feel free to send me an email. But again, I'm going to send all this information out tomorrow along with the quiz and those resources that I mentioned earlier as well. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your Saturday and a great weekend.